This is an interview of Mr. Jack A. Crockford, July 2nd, 2003, at the Atlanta History Museum. Mr. Crockford, can you tell me what war and branch of service you were in, what your rank was, and where or when you served?
Yes, I was in what was then the Army Air Corps from, I think, 1942 till February of 46. I served with, I was a pilot, served with the 4th Combat Cargo Group in Burma, and our mission was to support the British 14th Army in their drive through Burma from Imphal to Rangoon. My rank, I separated with the 1st lieutenant, pilot 1st lieutenant.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
Where were you living at the time?
I was in my freshman year in college at Michigan State and lived close by, 30 miles out from Michigan State.
Why did you join?
Well, it was, I guess you'd say it was the thing to do. At that time, everybody was subject to the draft, and it just struck me that well, I wanted to fly, and I thought, well, I better enlist and hopefully make the choice and go on through the program, which for me worked out.
So the reasons that you picked that particular branch of service?
That was, we didn't have career planning in those days. And I shot on the Michigan State rifle team, and thought I wanted to be a Marine sniper. And on the way over to sign up, a friend of mine talked me into the Air Corps on the basis that, you know, why don't you do this and you'll learn a trade to be worth something to you later on. And I was interested in flying. It seemed to me, well, that makes sense. So I flipped over that fast.
It was probably a good choice.
Yeah, probably was.
Do you recall your first days in the service?
Very well. Of course, the first was, had to take a train from Battle Creek to Chicago in our civilian clothes. And I don't think up until that time I'd ever been on a train. Had no idea what the protocol was. Couldn't find a seat for a long time. And they put us up overnight in a gymnasium and loaded us on another train the next day or two and went to Biloxi, Mississippi to what we call boot camp, basically the boot camp of, I guess, all the services had basically the same training.
Can you tell me about your boot camp, your training experience? Do you remember any of your instructors?
Yeah, I think I remember the drill instructor. It was like all drill instructors. It was a guy named Sutton, and he was underneath it all, he was a good guy, but he was tough, like they were supposed to be. I was in Biloxi Field, and it was an area I wasn't used to, and they worked us pretty hard. And I guess the goal was to weed out the ones that weren't willing to work, apparently.
How did you get through there?
Pardon?
How did you get through it?
How'd I get through? Just persistence, I guess, patience. I never had any real difficulty there, although the hours were terrible. It was a whole new way of life to all of us, I think. You know, totally, all the activities were totally mandated by the Army. They told me when you could do this, when you could do that. And that's totally foreign to my background. But, it wasn't long till they had us thinking like they wanted us to.
Which war did you serve in?
Which war?
Yes, sir.
The World War II.
Where exactly did you go?
Well, I went to the West Coast for flying school. And after graduation, was assigned to the 4th Combat Cargo Group, which was a brand new organization. In fact, there were only 4 groups of combat cargo. It was a new concept, and I found out later it was designed particularly for the Burma campaign. And we went to India and flew out of India into Burma, supporting the British 14th Army primarily, and later on flew the hump into China.
Do you remember arriving at your first duty station there and what it was like?
Oh yeah, I remember that. I had strep throat, so I wasn't feeling real good. But we arrived at a place called Sylhet, India. We towed a glider all the way across India from Karachi. 2-day flight because you had to fly it slow. And we towed a glider to Sylhet and landed, and we were based there. And we moved into a little compound of bamboo bashes, and living was not that bad if you were used to that sort of thing, but it was pretty grim by today's standards, particularly when the monsoon set in, which came that later on. We got there in November 44. So the weather was pretty good until the monsoon set in the next spring.
What was your job or assignment there?
Well, I was a pilot at the time. I started out as a co-pilot, and then we graduated into splitting time and finally got crews of our own. And we were flying. Well, at the time we got there, the Japanese had that siege at Kohima and Imphal, and that was kind of the turning point of the war in the Pacific, actually. And they had just broken the siege at Kohima and had started south, pushing the Japanese out of Burma. They had taken Burma in 42, I think, when the Flying Tigers were there. And once they got over the hills into Burma, they didn't have any way of receiving supplies except by air. And that was our job. 4th Combat Cargo to the British, and there were a troop carrier group or 2, I don't really know. I think the 3rd Combat Cargo operated pretty much in the western part or eastern part of Burma. But we operated mostly down the Shinwen River to the Irrawaddy and on south to Rangoon, and it took, we started in fall probably, well, in November, and we got to Rangoon, seemed to me like May the next year, or the following year. And did a lot of flying in the meantime. It was a daily event, actually.
Did you parachute the supplies in, or did you actually go from one station to another with them?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Did you, when you delivered the supplies, did you parachute them in, or did you actually go from one station to another?
Some of that, but mostly we landed on little narrow strips. They were all the same in Burma. I can't remember any surface strips, hard surface runways. They were all dirt strips, very narrow and relatively short. And they were all laid out the same. They were one-way strips. and you landed this way, and at the end would be a little parking bay. You'd turn off there and unload your cargo, and if you had wounded or whatever to bring back out, you'd pick them up and take off this way. So it was really very challenging flying. I wouldn't take anything for the experience of it. And we learned how to handle the airplane under those conditions. Now, we weren't so great on instrument letdowns because there were no facilities for that. You just found your way the best way you could, and we always flew real low, 200 feet or so. The idea being to stay below, well, two things. One was you're pretty well hidden from Japanese fighters down there. And the other was, if you were low enough, we had the feeling that that ground fire didn't have very long shoot at you. And it must have worked because we didn't pick up a lot of holes, although we'd get small arms fire, and you rarely knew when you got hit. So, and we didn't really we considered the real threat was the weather and the flying conditions. That was really the threat to us. And you got to remember, we didn't have any equipment really. The airplane, it was a state of the art, and we were all thought, we got the latest thing, and it's good stuff, and it was for its time. But it was basically, the airplane was underpowered and overloaded and unarmed. So, and the navigating system, really all we had was ADF, which is low frequency. I don't even think they're using it anymore. And it was a mixed blessing because there weren't many stations. And once the monsoon set in, the flying conditions were very, very bad. I don't know, the monsoon is about 200 inches of rain in 6 months. And for the first time, they decided to carry on the campaign through the monsoon. I think up until then, they had always more or less called a truce and waited the weather out. When that year, they decided, well, we got them on the run, we'll keep out of it. So we flew through that, and it was, I'd have to say, it was a great experience. Finding the strips was a problem, but by the time the monsoon set in, we had flown so many missions that we pretty well knew Burma like the back of our hand, and could follow rivers and generally knew where you were just by looking. And granted, you couldn't see very far when the rain was pouring down, but at least somehow or other, we found our way in and out.
Did you see any actual combat?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, we saw it, but we weren't involved with it because we had no guns, which is a terrible frustration to me, I can tell you. And you'd see people on the ground shooting at you, and all you could do was just kind of hump up and bore on through it. And many of the strips, these strips, they'd move as an army, as a 14th Army moved. And so these strips, they'd build them as close as they could. Frequently, we'd be going in strips that were surrounded. And firing was pretty close. One in particular, a place called Mike Tila, was one of the deciding battles of Burma, I think. Down kind of in middle of Burma, near the Wadi River, just off of it. And that strip was surrounded for I don't know how long. In fact, they closed it a while. And even when it was open, they'd time our arrival. It would vary, but they would give us a time before which you didn't land there. Usually it was around 10 o'clock in the morning. And at that point, they were supposed to have the strip cleared, and it was usually. But you couldn't leave an airplane there overnight, and it was a near thing there. But we flew through the whole thing and did some dropping there because we couldn't land. But as far as being involved in a battle where we were shooting back, no, we didn't do that because we couldn't. And there were times I'd love to.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Not as many as we expected. And I really don't know the numbers, but the casualties were flying accidents. We lost one airplane and crew on the way over. We flew our own ships over, and we were all green and had a lot to learn about flying, and that was a major undertaking in those days. The route in particular, the leg in particular that I think everybody sweated out was the jump from South America to Ascension Island. That's a long, long ways, and with basically no, well, the only thing, like I say, we had ADF, but that island wasn't very big, be easy to miss it.
How many, excuse me, how many aircraft went over in a group at a time like that?
Our group we had 100 airplanes. We had 4 squadrons, 25 airplanes each, I think. And I think our group, I'm sure our group went together, but there were other airplanes involved in the transfer. And I remember for some reason or other, there was a B-26 outfit that was always scheduled to take off ahead of us. And we'd fly from one leg to the next, spend a night, and the next morning it seemed like we were always sitting on the end of the runway when the last B-26 started. Then our outfit would go and there would be somebody behind us, I guess. But, so there were a lot of airplanes in the air, all of them, well, I say, most of them going east or toward the war. Although that route was used by everybody, I guess, coming back that were flying. But we never did, I was never aware of that. We never saw any of them.
What type of aircraft did you fly?
I flew C-46, Curtiss Commando. It was a great airplane, but had a terrible reputation in the beginning. But once we learned to fly it, I think we thought it was the best of the bunch. And you better think that when you're flying one.
Were you wounded during the service?
No.
Do you have any memorable experiences you'd like to share? Anything in particular? Anything that really struck out at you that you haven't shared with us yet?
Many of them, but some of them sound probably pretty glamorized by now. But yeah, we had, I think everybody had some serious experiences. Well, the experience of just seeing the world was great, but I assume you're talking about battle-related experiences.
Whatever you'd like to share.
We had a lot of them. I did, and to the point that you'd be, as one of the guys said, you just sitting there waiting for impact, and fortunately, for me, it never happened. But you got to remember, we didn't have the equipment to make precision letdowns, and if you got 200 inches of rain in 6 months and you're flying through that stuff, you got to be, it's great to be good, I guess, but it's better to be lucky. And I learned right off the bat that the airplanes we were losing seemed to be, well, some at least, if not most of them, you were losing them when they were trying to get on the ground after they had found the runway. Because in that kind of weather, when you turn out to make a pattern, you lose the field. And we had no way to find it. I learned how to fly what we call low visibility approaches, practicing constantly. Every time I'd come in good weather or bad, I learned to trust it. And it was simply you flew over the field, and if you saw the runway, you instantly turned to the heading of the runway, the closest heading that you could get on. No matter the wind, anything, didn't matter. If you saw the runway, you turned lined up with it. And we had 2 compasses, and you uncaged the one that was set on 0. And then you had a standard pattern. You flew out a 45-degree turn, standard rate turn to the left, and start letting down on the final. And you had to trust it because you didn't have any other option. And when you're flying the hump in Burma or into China, the altitudes were so high and the loads were so heavy that you got committed to land before you were ready, because going around was not an option in many of those places. And so you just had to learn to trust them. And I had some real bad experiences. I had a load of Chinese troops picked them up at Lashio. And at that time we were flying back to China. And I had a load of Chinese troops and took off in weather out of Lashio just about dark. And it was clear we were overloaded when I left, because I took a few limbs off the top of a tree leaving, but there again, landing back there was not a real good option, and you were already airborne, so we went on to China, and the weather got worse and worse, and you see, we didn't really have any way of knowing what we were getting into unless some pilot was coming out and then you talked with him and he told you what it was. But anyway, we got over the hump, and Kunming was closed, and we went to, they wanted to turn us around and go home. We didn't have enough fuel to get back, so we had to get down somehow. And it's kind of grim to mention this, but I guess I will. The instructions were, in a situation like that, you just locked the cabin door and went out through the belly and just left them sitting there. And, that's not good. And so we decided we'd try it, and finally saw the runway and made a pass for it, and thought I had missed it. Pulling the gear up to belly it in on whatever we hit. Happened to see it off to my left, and we got on it and got stopped, barely. And it was raining so hard we couldn't taxi. We didn't know where we were. The strip was new to me. I didn't know where I was, and didn't know what runway I was on or anything for that matter. And it was that bad, and it was that close. Those kind of things, I think those kind of things happen to everybody. I missed an approach. There's another field over there that I've never been to, the weather was bad, and they had a 15-mile approach, I remember, outbound from the station. I saw the field straight in and thought I had a great final set up. And the guy in the tower finally told me, go around, you're too high. And I was way too high to get on the ground. So I started a normal go around, and he told me to fly downwind of whatever I think is 8,300 feet. And I told him I had, and by then I was back in the weather, and I told him I had 78 or something like that, well below what he told me. I asked him if I'd make it, and he said negative, there's rocks out there. And you know, you don't forget something like that. Somehow or other we stumbled around out there, and I did hit the field. We had a radio altimeter that went from 40 feet to 400. And at one point in my turn, in the fog over there in the weather, it went off the screen, which meant I was less than 40 feet off the ground. And we got in, never forget this, you had a little operating shack, operations with a little wooden shack sitting there. And they had this sign over the door, and it said, good work, you made it again. And I've never forgotten that. Oddly enough, I met sometime, well, probably in 1950 or so, I met a fellow became a great friend up at Rome that they told me had flown C-46s in Burma, so of course we had to start hanger flying, and he started telling me about his crash, and he did the same thing I did, only he hit the top of that hill that I missed by 40 feet and slid off the far side. And it was and those things I think happened, and that's what basically got our people. The Japanese didn't, they worried us, but they didn't worry us as much as weather and the flying conditions.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yeah, the DFC and 1 oak leaf cluster, air medal and 3 oak leaf clusters, and then I think there were 3, we called them battle stars or campaign ribbons. I can't recall the name of them, but they were for 2 of them were the Burma campaign, and 1 was from China. And other than that, no.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
By letter, those little, the little, what they call them, V-mail, had a very limited space. They're very light, and that's the way and sometimes mail be a long time getting there and coming back, so it was nothing like it is today. But that was the only way we had.
What was the food like?
The food? Well, by today's standards, it wasn't much. In fact, it wasn't much in those days. But it was all we had, and I don't remember. Well, I guess what I remember about it, as bad as it was, the guys, the Englishmen that we were flying to in Burma were laying out there in the mud, and the living conditions were so bad over there for them. You see, they went in there and they were there 6 or 8 months, just living in the mud and eating anything they could get. And so ours was better than that, but it was not excellent. I remember one of the things that, that country is has plentiful insect life. And we saw some of that in the mess hall. One of the things my mother had the worst trouble with me, and I didn't realize it until later, and she told me that when I came home, Mother baked bread, and they baked our own bread in Burma, and you just automatically learn to take a slice of bread and you hold it up and look for dark spots, and then you break it and throw them away. And I'd always, for several months, I'd always pick Mother's bread out and look, and not even thinking what that looked like. But you just learn to do that. I remember one night I came in from flying real late, midnight maybe, and they had some, they'd always feed us when we came in, something. This night it was corned beef hash, and the cook, I guess he felt sorry for me, he'd just baked some brownies, and he wanted me to take a brownie, and I said, fine. I said, why don't you take two? And I finished my hash, and I don't know why I broke that brownie. And here was a cockroach about that long, cooked right in the middle of it. And so the food, you know, I kind of laugh now. I see, I hear these complaints about army chow, and if they only knew. But we lived on it and were reasonably healthy, I guess, when we came back.
Did you have anything special that you did for good luck?
For what?
Did you have anything special that you did for good luck, or anything that you carried?
I don't think I had any serious superstitions. I had a pistol, an unauthorized pistol, actually a 22 Colt Woodsman of my own that I had taken with me, smuggled it over. And I always flew with it because in our escape kits, you know, we were armed with a 45 pistol. And in our escape kit, there was a box. It may have been 20 shot shells for that 45. And if you bailed out over there, you could be a long time.
Keep this one.
If you bailed out in Burma, you got to remember that was a remote country. In fact, the Naga Hills, the map showed it as unexplored. That's how remote it was. And if you bailed out over in there, you had to live on what you could shoot or catch or whatever. And I didn't have any faith in eating much if I had to shoot it with that 45. And so I always carried that 22 with me. And I guess that was probably my most serious belief in luck.
How did people entertain themselves? Did you have any entertainers there?
No, we had not where we were. I remember Jinx Falkenberg was over there, but this is part of the rivalry in combat cargo with the rest of the Air Corps. Nobody ever came where we were because we were living down in very close to combat and off the beaten trail. And no, I don't think we had an entertainer the whole time I was there, but we played. The guys basically played softball, and we had an officers club, an enlisted men's club. Always had badminton and ping pong tables. I was a great hunter and still am for that matter. And I spent as much time as I could when I wasn't flying on just hunting around there for jungle fowl, doves, ducks, and stuff that the cooks would cook them for us. they were a real treat.
Did you get a chance to go on leave while you were in the service?
I got grounded twice for, we flew so much, and I never realized how this worked until later. They didn't tell us a lot because they didn't want us to know a lot, like, apparently, but after a mission or after days flying, we would generally have a debriefing. And you'd have to stop at this tent, and our flight surgeon would be there, and our intelligence officer would be there, at least the two of them, sometimes the CO. And you'd sit down, and the way they softened the blow was the flight surgeon poured out 2 ounces of whiskey per mission for the day. And if he thought you needed more, he was very generous, I'll have to say. And the intelligence officer would keep us talking. It was just a bull session. We're having a drink and having a bull session about today's event. And from this, like I say, I didn't really understand the system at the time, but the flight surgeon was looking you over to figure out when you'd had about enough, just been used up. And when that happened, they'd ground you and send you somewhere to a rest camp. And I went on 2 of those while I was there. One of them up was a nice place, except I had appendicitis up there, but up in the mountains, in the tea plantation company, very nice. And the other one was at a Cox's Bazaar, which was a tent camp on the Bay of Bentonville, out miles from anywhere. And so it was just a way of getting away from the outfit and away from flying for a week or whatever and you'd come back then and they'd start flying again until you got worn out again.
What did you think of your fellow officers and the troops?
Oh, they were, you consider them the best people you've ever known, really. Unfortunately, they were from so many distant places, you kind of lose track of them, except on an infrequent basis. But they were among the closest friends that a man ever had, I think. And I respected any pilot that was a good pilot, and I think you'd have to say that our people were among the best. And I know that doesn't sound very polite, but the kind of flying we were doing was so different from what the other part of the Air Corps was doing. I don't think they ever really appreciated doing it. We were essentially bush flying in C-46 airplanes, and that's a challenge. The other thing that I really respected were the other people, were the engineering people, and how they kept those airplanes flying through the situation we were flying in is beyond me, because mud and dust, and yet we had very little engine problems. I had 3 engine failures in 400 plus missions, and that's an excellent record for the maintenance people. They somehow or other, they kept it going.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
I remember when the so-called, what they call it, the secret weapon. I'd been on the hunt and was coming back to Wichita from Kunming and listening to Armed Forces radio on our radio. Doris Day was singing Sentimental Journey, I remember that, and they cut into that song to tell us that they had used a super weapon, and that the war would be over in a matter of days, and we did not have a clue. You know, when I got back, we all gathered around and thought, well, this is just another rumor. And nobody knew what a super weapon was. I had no idea about that. Which I think surprises people today, that they just presume that sort of thing was common knowledge. And unfortunately, a lot of the secrecy wasn't so secret. As a matter of fact, the day we got, you asked me about the day we arrived at our first base in Sylhet, Tokyo Rose came on the radio. On Tokyo Rose that evening, they had radios hooked up. And she welcomed our group by name and the name of our commanding officer to Burma. And was so sorry that all of these fine young men were going to be killed and leaving wives and sweethearts and that sort of thing. And you know, this was something we didn't even know where we were going until, well, an hour out of Florida when we started overseas. An hour out, we opened our orders to see where we were supposed to be going to. So we thought this was pretty secret, but it didn't appear to be to the Japanese. And that worried me a little, I have to say, that they knew more about our business than I did.
When you came back to the United States and got discharged, where did you get discharged from?
I'm sorry, one of my hearing aids went out.
When you came back after the war
Mm-hmm.
to be discharged, where were you discharged from?
We came by boat and came into New York and took a train to Camp Atterbury, and I was discharged from Atterbury.
What did you do in the days and the weeks afterwards?
It was well, I was very fortunate. I got home between Christmas and New Year's, and it was a tremendous letdown. And we lived on the farm, and it was cold and snowing, and I was gonna, take some time off because that would seem to be the thing to do. And after about a week of that, 2 weeks at the outside, I realized this wasn't going to work. And my mother was convinced it wasn't, because she told me later I'd just stand at the window and gaze out at the countryside. So I'd been a student at Michigan State, and I decided just on a whim to go down there and see if I could go back to school. It was about a week or two into the quarter, long after the registration was over, and I went down there and I knew I had an advisor from pre-war, and talked to him, and he went out of his way to get me admitted back in college. So I didn't have that long period of adjustment. I was right back in school, which is the best thing ever happened to me, because it could have gotten kind of boring out there. I don't know what I'd have done if I hadn't had something specific to do.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
After the war, yeah. $65 a month, I think it was. And I used that. That doesn't sound like much money. And it wasn't even then, but I never had to borrow any money. I had jobs all the time I was in college, and the $65, it made a big difference to a lot of people, I'm sure.
Did you make any close friendships while you were in the service?
Oh, yeah. A guy I flew with, well, two people I flew with became really close. But then once the war was over and one of them drifted, well, he didn't drift, he lived in Iowa. The other one lived in California. I lived in Michigan, going to school. And I moved to Georgia to work, and so I wasn't able to, you know, really keep close contact. But yeah, I had some good friends, really fine people.
Did you join a veterans organization? You know, such as?
No, I
being
joined the
covered?
hump pilots finally, and I've been a hump pilot, belonged to Hump Pilot Association. But then I'm a member of Burma Star, which is an English organization, but that just happened in the past few years because Americans weren't eligible up until they, I never was in the VFW or what's the other one, American Legion, for whatever reason. I just didn't, I'm not much on joining, I guess.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Oh, yeah. Well, I can't really say how it did about, specifically about those two subjects, but I've noticed this, that guys my age, it clearly was a turning point in our life, I think, because unconsciously you tend to date things, you know, you're sitting there visiting with a friend and say, well, that was before the war, or that was after the war. And I think that, at least in my case, I still tend to think of things before and after. And I'll tell you what it really did for me was during my career, after the war, there were some unpleasant times in my work. Not many, but a few. And I can remember thinking the worst days I've ever had since in my career, I could always think, well, you know, this is all pure profit, just being here. And that made a tremendous difference to me. And I think that anybody that thinks about that has got to look back on a military career as a real plus in the way you look at things later. Wars, you know, they're terrible, but there's a time when you're just going to have them, apparently. The Army or the military, it's like a lot of other things. It's so easy to criticize the way they do things. You know, you could say the same thing about government. But when it's all said and done, somehow it worked. You know, when we were involved in the campaign, I couldn't wait to see what combat was truly like, and it didn't take long till I saw some. And I came away with the overwhelming impression I got was this is utter confusion, and you wondered how anybody made any sense out of it. And I think that's the thing people tend to overlook today is if they haven't been involved in something like that, the decisions by the time they hear about them are pretty straightforward. But at the time they're happening, they're not that simple. And so I didn't stay in for a number of reasons, but I don't think that was one of them. Not that I had a bad impression of the military.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered in this interview?
I've probably said too much already, but this is a subject that could just go on and on. Right at the moment, I don't think of anything. But it was a great experience. Unfortunately, it was very expensive for a lot of people. But one of those things that had to be done, and so it was done. I don't think of anything more at the moment.
We really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this, sir.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have somebody interested.